use of time is a very important thing. I think time management skills, very important. Realising that everything has an opportunity cost. If you do A, you're not spending your time doing B.
What's an example of that?
I think that all of this is a matter of balance. I think it's important to be, if you want to go on in a career in physics, you need depth and breadth. That's hard. I mean, you're not going to get the same degree of intellectual depth across a huge range of things. But I think if you're very one-dimensional and there's one thing that you can do brilliantly, I mean, some people do make a career out of that, but I think it's important to have intellectual depth and development, and therefore you want to be reading around and you want to be reading more broadly across your field into neighbouring fields. Very often the big advances occur at the interfaces between fields, and that can be sometimes a dangerous place to be in because you're neither one thing or the other, or you're trespassing on somebody else's territory, but actually that's where a lot of the progress happens. So I think being adventurous in your reading, being adventurous in your thinking is an important thing to do.
There's an opportunity cost there, as you said, right? So
there's
you
an
can spend a lot
opportunity
of time
cost.
reading in fields that are not yours and then not be productive. Right?
So I think one of the things when you're an academic is a feeling of being continually unsatisfied with yourself, because there's all these things that you have to do. You want to read around more broadly, you want to get deeper into your field, you want to spend more time developing your experiment or your theory. And I think that's completely natural. But I think if you keep on pushing in these areas, often I think what people more often than not lose is that broad reading, which I think is important.
Yeah. And they lose that because they're spending time on the wrong things, or the pressures are too high.
Sometimes I think it's the pressures are too high, but I think it is important if you want to make a career as an academic. I think it's important to have that kind of intellectual breadth, because fields dry up, and sometimes they dry up temporarily. In a particular research avenue, just gets to a stage where you just can't make progress, maybe for a few years until there's a breakthrough somewhere else, and then things come back. So there are lots of examples of fields that kind of go out of fashion and then come back into fashion. But I think because of that, if you're going to be a research physicist, you want to have a number of avenues of research going. And so I think if you can develop that breadth, that's important.
And what do you think are some tips for being productive and getting things written up and published?
I think you have to... I think a temptation these days, because we have email the whole time and people expecting instant responses, and all of those temptations of being at the computer but not actually working, I think it's very important that you do carve out for yourself time to work on those papers, to get things written up, and to get research to a completion point. Now, in one sense, research is never completed. Any research project will always have some loose ends that haven't been tied up. But I think if you can get research projects to a point at which you can complete them, and particularly, I think, avoid that temptation of just checking that news website or that latest email or the Facebook or the Twitter, if people are into that kind of stuff. I think they are very time-sapping.
And what is it you think that, when do you think a project is done? Because there's always more. If you think about it, every project you do, you could always do one more experiment or one more calculation.
You can, and sometimes that is the right thing to do. And there are some projects I've been working on where I've delayed publishing for years because I'm not satisfied with the answer. There's one I'm working on at the moment that I could have published 5 or 6 years ago, but I've been sitting on it because I haven't figured it out to my own level of satisfaction.